tip number one, if you're sneaking into another country / planet, one, you got to go as a fat guy, especially if you're a fat guy, because, you know, that's all you can dress up as. So, you know, the only way you can trump that is if you're a fat chick.
Yeah.
You know? Nobody will suspect you then.
Nah, homie.
However, they might suspect you if your disguise can only say one fucking thing.
Yeah.
And it's 2 weeks. Even though clearly there's going to be more requirements along the way. Also, by the way, this disguise, in case you need to throw it away, it seconds as a bomb, at which point it'll decide to say something else.
Yeah. Also, the second you take off that disguise, the rest of the disguise will go away magically.
Yeah, and you'll become a super muscular guy. Yeah. So anyway, we saw that movie. Total Recall.
Interesting enough, you do have the recently released 4K version. Yeah. But we actually saw it in VHS.
Yeah, we chose to see it in this super crappy standard definition, full frame version.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
It was awful. No, yeah, man, Total Recall is, I think, undeniably a classic in a lot of people's eyes.
Would you call it sci-fi, though?
That's the thing, man. We tried doing this video right before this current one. Yeah. And it just hit me as I was trying to blabber my way through it that, I mean, it's a sci-fi movie, but it like you said in that cut of the video, the director's cut, if you will, it's so 80s that you kind of forget that it's a sci-fi movie.
Yeah.
You know, I almost forgot it. It also had action elements. I was just like, damn, this is 80s as shit.
Yeah.
Ain't it? That's not a bad thing, though, at least not in my opinion. Because a lot of people have fondness for the 80s. But nostalgia aside, Total Recall, I think, deserves the status that it has for a variety of reasons. And we'll talk about those and any negatives that we might see along the way as well. So this was, we didn't churn out the old crankometer to see the VHS. That's what it's called, right? But we did see the 4K.
This is an Avid home entertainment release. Never even heard of
Remember Avid? Now we did see the Blu-ray version, but it's the best I've ever seen the movie, to be honest with you. You know, there was some issues with the other Blu-rays that were released before that. But this is the same 4K scan as the 4K disc. So anyway, so if you're interested in that, I mean, this is the way to go right here.
Mad cheap.
So snatch it.
Yeah.
Anyway, that aside, let's talk about Total Recall. If you haven't seen Total Recall, well, I gotta admit that there's at least a generation or maybe even two that haven't probably seen it.
Yeah.
You know, if you haven't seen it, it's about this cat named Douglas Quaid that has a pining desire to visit Mars, stemming from his dreams.
As one does.
You know, I dream about Mars all the time.
Yeah.
Bruno Mars, that is.
Yeah, it's not good, guy.
Very erotic dreams. I do not welcome him in my dreams, but he just shows up.
He's like Freddy.
But yeah, he's the new Freddy. It's not a good movie. Yeah. But anyway, yeah, he there's something about Mars that intrigues him. So he goes to a corporation that manufactures memories called Recall, which apparently seems to trigger a response from him, suggesting that he may actually be some sort of secret spy agent. Or is he? Because, you know, the whole setup of the movie makes you question what is real and what may not be real. And then it does that again. It kind of doubles up on that. Which, by the way, I got to say, that's my first kudos to this movie, that it kind of never lets go of the idea that this may all be a fabrication. In fact, the closing shot just kind of, you know, brings that back up.
Yeah, I was actually kind of relieved because I don't remember that being a thing. I hadn't seen this in like forever since the first DVD came out.
Yeah.
So it was kind of good to see that be in there. It was actually kind of cool, and there's even like little kind of micro hints in there. Like there's a passing line about the blue skies of Mars.
Yeah.
That ends up being a thing at the end. So that is actually cool.
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff, like you said.
Literal walls crumbling that is mentioned in the scene. Yeah.
The mere fact that the people that are that he meets are exactly those in the type that he dreamt of. The idea of dreams themselves being the thing. But what's great about it is that the movie never goes into that territory of it was all a dream, is one of the hardest things to pull off successfully. And even if you do pull it off successfully in a movie, chances are that it's gonna split crowds if you do pull it off successfully. You know, people are gonna write, "Oh, Dream, that sucks." So it never goes into that territory. It actually makes it more interesting. So that's my first big kudos. My second big kudos is the fact that Rob Bottin's effects are fucking phenomenal. Of course, if you're a fan of film, he's most renowned for his work on The Thing. And yeah, he has this very unique, very realistic, and yet also gruesome approach to effects.
It's strange because it's weird because like his effects look really good when they're like horrible creatures. But there's a couple of like fake Arnie heads in this, which vary from shockingly good to what that. But they all look pretty good for what they are. You know what I mean? It's not like that head in Terminator where you're like, oh man, that head though. They're all still pretty impressive effects.
Yeah, they all maintain like a skin tone that's credible. They move in a way that feels a lot more natural than your usual prosthetic heads do. He just has a way of making effects look very interesting at the very least. Maybe if they're not 100% realistic, they definitely look amazing in a way, technically amazing. And so Bottin gets a big thumbs up for me for that, man. It's always fun to see his work, especially now that he's like literally gone off the face of the planet.
Homie does have some gruesome ass Mars effects in this.
Dude, yeah, the people gasping for air has got to be the most horrifying effect I've seen ever, man.
Yeah.
And Arnold's already an ugly guy. Well, he's not ugly, but
he's a unique looking guy.
He's very unique, especially when he screams.
Yeah.
So now we got like a permanent scream, and he's also like his eyes are fucking popping out of his head, and it's a disgusting effect.
Yeah.
But
it's an impressive effect, and there's like another Arnold head in early on that's insanely detailed, and they pair it up to like a previous scene of just Arnold, and though the head looks really good, it's like too detailed. Yeah. You know what I mean? So it's weird because the effects are really impressive in the amount of detail, but they're still not super realistic. But they're very interesting to look at. Yeah. The only one that I think is kind of iffy is the one when the head splits open, the Arnold head underneath kind of is weird and lopsided. But even then,
it looks pretty impressive.
Yeah, and it's not really the focal point of the effect. Yeah. You know what I mean? So you don't really notice it too much. But homie did have a lopsided head.
Yeah.
That being said, all the other prosthetic stuff on other people looks really good. Guado especially. Saying Guado, but
yeah, Guado.
Yeah.
So yeah, man, all around impressive effects, and of course that comes hand in hand with watching almost any Paul Verhoeven movie, at least up to a certain point. He was kind of renowned for bringing in big, epic effects and action sequences into his pictures. And, that was for the bulk of his American career. And that's kind of what he was known for. While not completely presenting to the audience a vacuous experience either. Because also with a Paul Verhoeven movie, you usually get some substance. And it's usually satirical in nature, or at least it dances in the area of satire. In this case, we have less of that satirical approach. Although there is some dark comedic elements in this. It's more concerned with making a point, like an anti-corporate point. But it never bogs down the movie either, as is kind of his way. It's always there. It's always a thing you are aware of, but it's never like groan-inducingly cloying or anything like that. It's kind of cool, actually.
It's also not super duper turned up to 11 like it is in Starship Troopers or
Robocop. Yeah.
But it is still there. So
yeah. If anything, as he did with Starship Troopers, like you say, he turned down the heat, being presented. The Starship Troopers novel is actually a very pro-militaristic story, very almost fascistic in nature, whereas his Starship Troopers movie is very anti-military. and it approaches that with a satirical edge,
Yeah.
you know, which kind of makes it, you know, seem like it's pro-militaristic, but it's really just kicking the ass out of that idea. There's not that approach here. We got a pretty clear delineation between what's good and what's bad. There's no playing with the idea of, you know, this or that, other than our main character has this kind of identity crisis of sorts. But that's more typical of Philip K. Dick's material, this is based on a Philip K. Dick story. And Dick always played with identity issues, you know, Blade Runner, etc., you know, or Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. You know, that was always kind of a thing in his stories. That being said, that is not to suggest that Total Recall is a loyal adaptation of the Philip K. Dick story. In fact, it deviates quite a bit from it, and it's equally as much a K. Dick story as it is a Verhoeven movie. So that is also something I appreciate, man. You know, sci-fi can get a little heavy-handed sometimes, especially when it has a purpose. And though I think there is room for loyal Dick adaptations, and by that I mean Andy Dick.
Yeah. Oh, God damn!
Nobody wants those.
The worst sci-fi film. And in person.
I'm very glad that there is a more there's something a little bit more tempered with somebody else's style, and that's something I greatly appreciate Paul Verhoeven for.
I do think that. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not gonna shit on those kinds of movies, but I do think that, you know, like the a little too serious kind of sci-fi, people are actually kind of bad movies can kind of get a little stale. So it is cool to see.
Yeah, it takes somebody special to make it work.
Yeah,
you know?
So it is cool to see his style be. It's just cool to visit his style again.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Verhoeven, though injecting tons of style, never clouds over the substance, and I think that's key to what you're saying.
Yeah.
Like Neil Blomkamp does the same. There's a lot of style.
Yeah,
there's a lot of him in what you see.
Yeah, it makes it unique. Yeah.
But you still get that message. So it's still as much what it was at the source material, while bringing in this very bombastic style. And Verhoeven is definitely bombastic. Speaking of bombastic, guy, the score in this is pretty like in your fucking face. I never really noticed that until this viewing. I was like, damn, this score all up in my grill. Is that good or is that bad in your opinion?
I'm not gonna hate. I do think that main theme starts off as a Mad Conan ripoff.
It does. That's true.
But I actually ended up not minding it. I was a little worried too, because I was like, damn, homie. But it's mad 80s, you know, and it kind of fits. So I ain't hating. I think maybe I'm a little forgiving because recently we've experienced some really invasive soundtracks and movies that just make me go stinky.
No.
But you know, it fits, I think.
Yeah, I like it. You know, it's like you said, it's very of the time.
Yeah.
And this is kind of like, for a large portion of his running time, kind of like a chase movie. So it kind of makes sense, you know. It doesn't feel like a violation of yours, and it's not a bad score.
No.
Most importantly, it's not a bad one. So there's that, but it is like, whoa, like sometimes it's like, damn, boy,
it's pretty upfront.
It's all up there. But
also, gotta give mad kudos to. We already mentioned the effects when it comes to like prosthetics and shit, but I gotta give effects. I gotta give mad kudos to some of the just kind of strange like landscape stuff and then like environment stuff. Again, it never looks super realistic, especially like the open landscape areas, but they have a very unique look. You know, like there's a lot of shots of like panning around in like these open Mars areas. And when you look at individual pieces, you can tell that they're kind of stitched together from different elements, but they just look really interesting. And I really like that. And also, of course, there's mad set work in this, which just looks cool in the 80s. So mad kudos to that.
Yeah. Again, it takes a specific type of charm to get away with some of the very sets. And part of that has to do with the way they're designed. They look, you know, sci-fi. I can't explain it to say that there's a particular sci-fi look where you just forgive the schlocky look of things.
Especially like in the Earth, like future stuff, like the cars are all blocky and shit.
Exactly, yeah. It's almost like a tradition now to make things look that way.
Yeah.
But there's a particular charm that it has to be approached with, that if you don't hit, it could be like hella crap.
Yeah.
But, this is one of those movies that established that aesthetic, that made it cool. So it's cool. You know what I'm saying? It's cool. It's cool stuff.
I do also think that the fact that it does get a little less, again, I don't want to say shitty, but again, a less corny, 80s corny effect when it's in Mars, because the stuff in the future Earth, you can just look at a car and be like, dude, those cars aren't gonna look like that in the future. Whereas in Mars, they kind of established that they're just kind of like this. There's a shitty part in Mars, you know what I mean, and everything just kind of fits. There's a bar called the Sleaze. What's the Sleaze something?
The Sleaze bar.
Yeah, it's just great,
Pretty to the point.
Yeah, it's like, come on, guys, they're calling themselves Sleaze.
Yeah, there's definitely, I would translate all these elements into giving this film a personality all of its own. And again, that's very typical of Verhoeven films, at least as American fare. But it's also something that ingratiates the public to the material so much that in their absence, people will rebel. We've experienced this before with the Robocop remake. It didn't have those things, which I applauded, because it's kind of brave to go in and say, we're not going to have that distinctive look, that Verhoeven approach to it.
Yeah, it is a risky thing.
But the thing is that that's kind of part of what made people love those movies. So you take a big gamble.
He puts a stank on it so much that it just kind of becomes his.
Yeah, and it's almost like like a death wish to not do that. But at the same time, you wonder, if you do that and you fail at that, then you just come off looking like a fool. Or if you do it and don't fail, you still are just like, oh, well, he's just ripping off, So is there a winning formula? Yeah. The answer probably is not, because Total Recall also got a remake called Total Recall, which
coincidentally no one recalls.
Yeah, it was pretty much lambasted across the board. We'll talk about that in another video. But I actually enjoyed this quite a bit. But I understand why people, just the same way I understand why the Robocop remake, people would be like, what the hell? And one of the things is that the release of this was PG-13, which, just like the Robocop thing, Verhoeven made R-rated movies across the board.
It's mad R.
Though this, by today's standards, is easily like a fucking PG-13. It has to be, because there's fuck a few times and the tits.
I do think
that, but really, like, sensibility wise, it's like a PG movie,
I think the gunshots would still be a freaking,
that would be the only problematic thing,
because you do get some almost Robocop level gunshots at times.
Yeah,
not to that extreme.
Only less chunky. Yeah, definitely less spray going
really
on.
Really good squid work, though, I gotta say. Squidward did the squid work. It was pretty good.
Yeah, that's why he's so depressed all the time.
Like, God damn, homie.
He based it off his suicide. Squidward is dead. Yeah, pass it around.
Mad dead. Homie smells like fish.
But yeah, man, that just goes to show you what Verhoeven's, like you said, stank really brought to the game. He made something visually iconic, on top of being memorable, on top of being entertaining, on top of all this other stuff. And like we touched upon, there's always kind of a sense of humor to a lot of his work, and that's kind of important. It whenever he didn't have an outright, like, a tangible sense of humor, it affected his work. Like Hollow Man, there's not a lot of humor in it. There are elements there, but they're pretty much not as present in it. And we all know how everybody reacted to that, on top of other issues it may have not had. See our review on that. We actually enjoyed it. But humor is a part of that.
To take that out is kind of like neutering the dude in a way.
Yeah. Which, by the way, bringing it back to that's something that a lot of people complain about this, that it lacked humor, that it was, they called it soulless and all that stuff. But in my opinion, it has to do with that. It's that they're missing the Verhoeven in it.
No.
You know what I'm saying?
I think that is I'll say that is kind of a fair point though, especially with RoboCop, just because what people like, in my opinion, at least for me, is that stuff. You know what I mean? Like when you strip down when you strip all that out of RoboCop, it ends up being just kind of like a not very interesting story. The fact that he made it his own and made it so unique is what makes it RoboCop. So it makes Total Recall. I haven't seen the remake, so I can't speak about that.
I think, to put it in from my point of view, I think it's more valid with RoboCop. I'm not defending one or the other. I'm just saying it's more valid with RoboCop because that was an original creation.
Yeah.
Whereas with Total Recall, it is supposed to be an adaptation.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I can't really say about it.
On that note, both of these movies deviate from the source material. They keep the basics, you know. They keep the basics of the story, and that's kind of what you need to make the point. They kind of make the same point. They kind of have the same beats, you know. But there's that marked difference in that personality, which you know, is that thing, man, the Verhovenness.
And it's a very hard thing to replicate too. Like,
yeah, it's
like
his.
the Starship Troopers sequels failed at that shit. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, big time.
RoboCop arguably failed at that too.
Yeah,
the sequels. So it's kind of like. Yeah, it's very interesting that he has a stank, and his stank is almost impossible to replicate. But he creates franchises that people want to see more of.
Yeah, and then, you know, we're probably never going to get that from him anyway. I will say, though, on that note, that the RoboCop 2 was probably the sequel to any of his work that comes closest to touching on that, because it's got some wild shit. It's just not as good, nowhere near as good as the first one. But it's because of Frank Miller's personality. Yeah, it's still weird. All over that script. Even though they changed it so dramatically, it's still all over there. You know, from the weird comic booky kid villain to the exaggerated violence, and you know. But yeah, of course, yeah, you just can't duplicate the Hove, as I like to call him. So anyway, anything bad in this movie that you want to point out, or maybe not bad, but you know, something that you know. Objectively, we could be like, that's a thing.
I mean, if you're being honest here, but I can't hate. You know, before I even say it, I can't hate. Before being honest here, Arnold Homie's one-liners are mad bad.
Yeah.
But I can't hate because that was like his thing back then.
Yeah, also, again, the whole, you know, kind of like tongue-in-cheek, hammy approach to the material makes it okay for him to do stuff like that.
I can't say that there's anything that made me hate. I was a little worried when the main villain was introduced because, not Ironside, the other dude.
Mm-hmm.
Because when he's first talking, I was like, oh, this guy sucks at acting. But thankfully he wasn't that bad. He actually was okay once they let him scream and shit. But just his his voice in the beginning, I was like, oh no. But thankfully he was fine. I think Ironside is pretty rad.
I will say that the main two villains, which is Michael Ironside and Ronnie Cox, right? They're very reminiscent of the villains in RoboCop.
Mad OCP,
you know, it's pretty much just that.
Yeah.
You know, your corporate head and your henchman,
big time.
henchman.
Like it should have just been red.
That. So if you're ever pissed at the way the head honcho gets off in RoboCop with a long ass arms falling out the window,
homie.
Then this guy really gets it the worst. It's got to be one of the coolest deaths for a bad guy.
Homie gets mad bald.
Yeah, everybody's like screaming and busting out their eyeballs and shit, but he actually goes all the way. It's pretty cool. It's a pretty good way to die, I gotta say.
Yeah. I do think that... Look, again, I can't hate because it became a long-running joke between us. Mm-hmm. And I guess the entire world, once I you know... got access to it, I was like, oh man, everybody knows it. But this was the movie where I first noticed the
it is, man.
And it is like there.
It's prominent. Happens more than once. Even when it's not happening, you can feel it happening like inside him. He wants
to do it, guy.
Yeah, it's mad happening, guy. Anyway, yeah, man, Total Recall remains a classic. Very good to see that it, you know, we've revisited some where it's like, oh man, that's not good.
Stinky.
But Verhoeven has never failed to entertain me and even surprised me because I didn't originally like Hollow Man. But upon revisiting it, man, I had a fun time with that. Even though it is a flawed movie, I really had a fun time. This Verhoeven's a cool guy.
I gotta give mad. That's my final mad props. There's a scene in this in which Arnold is using a jackhammer, and is a fan of body mass and physiques. I gotta say that Verhoeven put some work into that jackhammer beefcake shots, guy. Homie was like holding that shit, and he's got mad muscles, guy.
You know what's weird? You know how he has like a friend that works on him on that job site?
Mario looking
guy. Again, it's been since that DVD edition, the Mars edition, you know, that I still have somewhere here. Since that was released, that I've seen the movie. But for that entire time, I remembered that guy being a black guy.
Oh, yeah?
And I was like, damn, it was just a fat Mario-looking jerk.
Super Mario looking.
Who wants that guy? Anyway.
Beefcake shot's pretty good.
Beefcake shot's great. But anyway, yeah, man. Always a great time to revisit Total Recall, but especially now that we got this 4K Slamadoo. And if you don't have the 4K, set up to, take that full advantage of it, this comes with a Blu-ray that has the same scan, so,
And it's mad cheap.
Super cool. And, yeah, it's super cheap, guys. So.
It's kind of cool to see how much this was in the way, well, yeah, I guess it was kind of influential on the look of a lot of movies.
Yeah.
Like, it's you could see a lot of Fifth Element in this.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So that's kind of cool, just revisiting, because I hadn't seen it in forever. So it's kind of like, damn, homie.
You know what's not cool? This glossy cover that just picks up every fingerprint ever.
It's pretty good.
Hate that. But anyway. And on a final note, we'll talk about it when we do the review for this eventually. But if you do venture to see this, I know it's difficult for a lot of people. I'm experiencing that right now with The Stand. I'm in a Stephen King group, and people will not shut up about how it's not the miniseries. Like, yes, it's not. Somebody else completely different made it, It's not as good as this. It's a much more serious approach. It's a much more action, kind of like dystopian sci-fi future type of movie. But this is actually kind of a fun movie. Stylistically, at the very least, you'll be kind of... and action-wise, you'll be like, well, that's pretty cool. If you just open your mind to it, you see? Apparently, fucking Quado's Mexican.
Oh, yeah, I gotta say that. We were watching the Arnold classic. Which, in case you forgot, I'm gonna give you a recall here. And we were making mad, like, lines every once in a while. And somehow, our Arnold got worse as it went along.
Oh, yeah. It's never been good to begin with.
By the end, it was just like... Hey, guy.
By the end, it was just screaming, really.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I don't derailed you.
Yeah, I don't hate this movie at all. I think it's actually kind of cool. It's very entertaining.
I think that it has without having seen it, I think it can get a pass because they're both based on something.
Yeah, that's really the thing.
It's not a remake; it's an adaptation.
And then both of them just kind of take their liberties with it. This is kind of a weird version because it does pay homage to Verhoeven's movie in certain ways. Like, it tips its hat to it. There's things that are straight out of it, only kind of remixed, obviously.
Of course, the name.
But it also goes back to the story for some shit. Like, we never leave for Mars here. Nothing like that, Again, this is much more like a dystopian future action movie with the same basic skeleton. It's written by Kurt Wimmer, who did Equilibrium, and it's directed by Len Wiseman, who did the first Underworld movie. So I'd say give it a shot if you can open your mind to it being something completely different. But, of course, if you just want to be satisfied the way you've always been satisfied, then get some beefcake action from Arnold.
Yeah, it's got to be one of my top 10 beefcake scenes.
So anyway, let's give a final score to Total Recall, the classic 80s flick. Scale of 1 to 10, go.
It does got the mad beefcake scene. It is mad fun. I got to give it like a mad... I feel like this is too high, but screw it. It's my rating. I'm going to give it a mad 9.5.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to take 0.5 off because that beefcake scene could have been longer.
7-hour cut of beefcakes?
Dude, 7 hour? The beefcake cut?
I feel you. I'm gonna give it a 7.5. I'm putting this in comparison to other Verhoeven flicks,
Well, yeah.
and I think that's fair, and it's a score I think that very much represented.
I would agree. Let me just say I would agree that it's not as good as his other movies.
Yeah.
But it is a highly enjoyable movie, and that's why I
and it's so fun on so many levels. Yeah. An '80s movie, pop it in. Arnold movie, pop it in. A Verhoeven movie, pop it in. An effects movie, pop it in.
Yeah.
It's so much to enjoy in the movie. So, I know some people might find the 7.5 low, but I'd say 7.5 is a great score. What are you talking about?
Yeah, I would
agree.
I'm
putting it in that context.
Yeah, I would agree.
If
you're looking at it as a whole, as a movie, I would agree that it's probably like a 7. But my enjoyment factor, especially since we just saw it, is mad high. So that's why it's probably too high for my rating.
So there you go, guys. Tell us what you think about Total Recall. Let us know in the comments down below. In the meantime, hit like, share, subscribe, and those notification buttons to get a free Avid Home International video. That's not this one.
Nah, homie.
Also, not giving away a free Avid Home International video.
Definitely not.
Anyway, we're out.
Money. Oh, Carol call?